because you never trust YouTube, as I said. Let me see. Refreshing. Should this thing should be faster. And we're in. We're in. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on the time of the day you're watching this. Because I don't know if you watch it live or you watch it in zombie mode, which is non-live. That doesn't mean you're dead. It's just a stupid joke. But hello, everybody, and I hope you're having a good week. First things, my public service announcement of the day, as I always do. I already warned our guest today, so he's not surprised about the way I say things. But to all of you, as I always say, let me prepare the microphone so you hear it well. Wear your fucking mask. Let me repeat. Wear your fucking mask. The mask is not to protect you. It's to protect others from you. That's why you wear it. So you don't spit in others' faces, get the meal. Virus is airborne, as you know. Take care of others. Take care of your families. Take care of your elders. Take care of your kids. If you believe kids don't get infected by this virus, that's a lie. They do. So please, take care of everybody you love and cherish, because you can get them killed, or even, if not get killed, but with chronic illnesses that are really, really, really awful. So please do that. And as I always say, if you don't think you should wear a mask, you think you're immortal, or even worse, you don't care about anybody else's safety, leave this fucking channel now, because I don't want you here. And that's it. After that fine, polite way of saying things, hello, Jason. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing fine. How's things in your neck of the woods? How's life?
It's good. Getting ready for the holidays. Been busy with work. Just moved, so it's been a busy, weird, busy year.
What is the thing that you miss the most? Imagine, my name is Victor Frankenstein. Nice to meet you. This floating pen is my screen. I just popped it on you and said, pandemic is over. Fuck it. We're
Right.
off. We can do whatever we want. What could be the first thing that you've been for months saying, I want to do that?
I think just going out and being able to hang out with friends again, being able to hug your friends, going to see live music. Yeah, probably those.
Did you miss conventions at all?
I do. Yeah, I do miss conventions. I miss, that's a big part of my life, is just that time of being able to travel, go to places a lot of times I've never been before. Um, and, one, see all the other people who make comics, people I work with, literally from all over the world. So we never see each other except when we're at shows.
Yeah.
And, to sit and meet fans. So I miss that. I've always liked doing cons. I never want to be one of those creators who complains about doing conventions. I always get annoyed with those people. It's one, it's like, well, don't do them if you don't want to. But two, it's like, really, like, is this should never feel like work. Going to a convention should never feel like I would do that over any actual job I ever had my entire life. That's actually fun.
Yeah, and there's like two sides of this, right? In one way, is those cons you always go to, where there's a fan or group of fans that you're going to see every year, and they almost become like your friends. So when people tell me, "Oh, I didn't think I was going to miss conventions," but then you start remembering, "Oh, this weekend I was supposed to be whatever, Chicago or Kansas City." And I knew this fan was going to be there, and we were going to chat about life for 30 minutes at my table. And then the second part of, as you said, the colleagues you see once a year, right? That you can only see in conventions. So that's why I always say when they talk about work, conventions as work, it's like, okay, for me, yes, it's long trips to the US, especially to the West Coast. But when you're there, it's the only chance you have to see the people you don't see in a year, right?
Right. Yeah, the social part of it for me is a big part of it. I'm there to hang out and chat with people again, because the rest of the time, I'm here, sitting here at this desk by myself. I'd leave the house to go to the grocery store, and that's about it.
Yeah, so for me, it's grocery store, walking the dog. That's it. The rest is staying home.
Right.
Well, and the kid when on the weekends gotta take them around. Not now because you can't, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
Is the when you work, well, in this, let me talk about the pandemic in this case. Has it affected your workplace at all? I mean, because I've had two answers here. Some people telling me that it's been really difficult for them to focus, especially in the first few months, and the
Yeah.
other side telling me that they don't realize it, but by the end of the day, when they check, word processor or pages, whatever, they tell me, "Wow, I've worked a lot more, and it's happening to me every day."
Huh. No, I haven't. I haven't been that second person. That sounds great. Yes, certainly the early part of the year, it was a struggle. I think, like you said, I feel like a lot of people have been in the same boat where it was just. I mean, one, I had less work to do because our entire industry shut down.
Mhm.
Everything did slow down. But even the work I had, it was harder to do it. I think it was just harder to focus. It's hard to turn off the world and be where you needed to be. That was really difficult for quite a while, but I feel like I got past that. And now work is good. I'm busy, and things are moving along. I don't know if I'm having those days where I wrote more pages than I thought I did. I would love to have some of those, but things are moving, which is good because I've got a lot of stuff. All the stuff that had been kind of paused is ramping up again, and I've been writing a bunch of stuff for next year. So yeah, things are going well, and I feel, thankfully I feel good about the stuff I'm doing. I'm excited about the stuff I'm working on, which
Mhm.
is Avengers and stuff you already know about, plus secret stuff coming up.
Yes, secret, big S. We are not going to say
Right.
anything else. Can you do you feel that have you felt that in some moments because of the war around you, and it's in your case in the US, it's not just the pandemic, it's the whole situation with Trump and the election and post-election,
Right.
which is the craziness we're living now. All the problems with black people of color safety, Black Lives Matter and all that. Have you felt during all these months that there was sometimes you just couldn't isolate from of it, that it was too much?
For sure, for sure. Like you said, it's been a lot, and I've had my own part of that going on too. So it's been a lot to deal with. Um, and it like I said, it was a struggle at times to kind of turn all that off and focus on work. But for me, when I'm not able to do that, when I'm not able to have that time to work, to write, like I don't function properly.
Yeah.
It's like is maybe 3 years ago, I hurt my back and um, was taking pain meds and laid up in bed and didn't write anything for a couple months, and it was like I was broken. It's like I
Hmm.
forgot how to breathe for a while because probably the first time I'd gone over a month without writing anything since I was 11 years old. Like, and it's just like some organ in my body wasn't firing. So um, I kind of need that. I need that to feel like the machine's running properly.
Yeah.
Like whether I mean, for me, it's also how I get paid and how I keep the lights on. But even if it's not, even in the years when it was not, when it didn't pay me anything, is still a thing I just needed to do to function.
Hmm.
So, so yeah, it's hard. It's hard those times when you can't for whatever reason.
Yeah, Mitch Wright was telling me a couple of weeks ago that even when he's not, drawing for something that he's gonna make money off, I still draw all day. I go around and I do a doodle here and there while I'm working, because for him, as you just said, it's just functioning. Yes, if I stop drawing, I feel like I'm not, but something is wrong.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know plenty of artists like that. The guys will just, if you're at a restaurant, they're like drawing on the napkin.
Yeah.
Like they just kind of have to do it, which is a sign. Usually, you can tell, like, well, those are the artists who are probably gonna do this for a living, right? Because they
Yeah.
have such a drive. They don't have to force themselves, like, oh, crap, I got to go draw this thing now. Like they are always drawing. And for
Yes.
me, it
Absolutely.
was, I was always writing. So you have to have that. really that passion and drive and almost like an obsession, to push it to the point where you're going to do it for a living.
Yeah, and if it was Guéra, your colleague Guéra, he would be
Right.
doodling, but he would be also theorizing about that for 2 hours.
Right. Yeah. Guéra is, those wheels are always turning. Like he's always an artist,
Absolutely.
24 hours a day.
Yeah,
I'm sure he is in his sleep too.
exactly. There's no disconnect with him. I can be with him, just, talking about theory and language for hours and hours and hours, and then suddenly it's like, oh, it's been 4 hours. And then,
Right.
okay, he'll say, okay, I keep going. So
Right.
it's the machine is cranking out all the time. Let me ask you something. When you're working, you need complete silence, or it depends on the phase. For example, some people is telling me that first preparing the idea, the concept, etc., is complete silence. Like an artist doing layouts, for example, is the same case. And then when you get to, I won't say more mechanical, but something that is more, writing the actual script, finishing, etc., giving revisions, they can listen to movies that are in the background that are, something that you've already watched, so it doesn't distract you, or music. How's your work method?
No, yeah, I can't listen to anything. I got to be complete quiet. No music, no TV, nothing.
Hmm.
I'm envious of the people who can listen to music, or artists who listen to podcasts, or have shows on in the background. Like they watch so much more TV than I do.
Hmm.
Because I have to spend a huge portion of the day just sitting in the quiet. But I think I'm just too easily distracted, or I just I'm just trying to be focused and just kind of be lost in what I'm working on. So even sometimes if you walk in and try to say something to me, like I might respond to you, but I probably didn't hear whatever you're trying to say. Just if I'm focused, because I'm just kind of lost in what I'm working on. So yeah, it's all quiet for me.
Yeah, it's the same with my wife. It's the same. During the pandemic, she had to be working here because she had to work from
Mm,
home, and it was like the same. I could say something, and or just completely hypnotized and no sound, and I was like,
right.
"Are you listening to me?" And she's like, But like, of course he wasn't, because she's completely focused. For
Right.
him, it's not even I don't know, draw ambient sounds or a cacophony, like
Uh,
some ambient sound around you, or that distracts you too.
for me, no. I like nothing. Um, just sit, and this is my office space now, so sit here with the ceiling fan on. That's about as much noise as I want, I guess.
Okay. Um, what is for you? What makes the comics language so unique, so different when we compare it, to movies, literature, theater, or anything else?
I mean, I think there's just something kind of magical to that simple combination of words and pictures, right? And for me, it's magical just in that collaboration process. I can't draw. I'm a really terrible artist. I think I drew all the time as a kid. Then I think at some point I kind of switched to writing, maybe like fourth grade. So I still draw like a pretty good fourth grader. That's about where my ability maxed out. I think probably worse than that now. I think I've probably gone down since then. So I'm a terrible artist. But I get to work with literally some of the most incredible artists all over the world. Um, so to have that collaboration happen, to me sit here and type up a script with whatever crazy idea I can think of, and send it off into the ether, and then I get these pages back, um, which I'm never the kind of writer who's like, the scripts, the art's got to look exactly like I wrote it. If I wrote 4 panels, I want to see 4 panels. Like that's not the way you make a comic.
Mhm.
My job's to kind of like, hey, here's some stuff that you hopefully get excited to draw, and then you draw it the way that you see it.
Mhm.
So whenever I get those pages back, in my email, it's so exciting, because that's that's the fun part, is seeing that realized, you know. Maybe it doesn't look exactly like it looks in my head, but, I'm not the one who can bring it to life in that
Hmm.
way. Um, and pretty much always looks better than it did in my head. So, oh, that to me is the exciting part, and then
Hmm.
having it become a thing and go out into the world and people, read it and enjoy it, that's a whole other part of the equation. But, to me, my writing still feels like a very selfish pursuit, you know? I mean, I don't know how to write stories to please anyone else. I just know how to write stories that I wanna read. I think
Hmm.
that's ultimately all you can ever do. You can't ever chase, like, well, I think people will love this one, or this one will go over great on Twitter. That way lies madness. Like, you have to sit down and think, what do I want to see? Like, what kind of book would I buy, and then make that happen, and then hope other people feel the same. I think,
Yeah.
to me, it never fails. Like, if you are really emotionally invested in something you're working on, and connected to it and affected by it, then other people will be as well. Maybe it's 10,000 people, maybe it's 100,000 people, you don't know. But, I think when you can honestly say that about what you're working on, then it'll have that effect. But ultimately, all you can control is your part of it. So, I feel selfish every day. I'm setting off some script.
Hmm. But it makes perfect sense. I always remember that phrase that Steve Jobs, used to say, which is, "I don't create the products that I expect people to like, because I have to create what I think is good, and then they will believe it's good. If I
Right,
create based on what the fans want, I could never create a good product. I have to create based on what I believe on, right?"
right,
So,
right.
what am I going to say? Based on that, I always thought that in your case with Guéra and some of the other artists, you work really, really in a lot of cases. Uh, the name writer and the name artist sometimes should become, because of the synergies you guys create, should become storytellers. Because by the end of the day, do you believe that when the comic is done, it's not you, it's not the artist, it's like a third entity that's created from what you guys do?
For sure. Yeah. I think, like I said, it's that collaboration. It's not exactly what it looked like in my head. It's not, it's very much a thing you build together. Um, so I think there are a lot of times, I mean, it's different book to book. I've worked on plenty of books where I've never met the artist. We've never exchanged an email. It's like, here's the script, and they draw the script. Others are things that, especially, in terms of creator owned books, those feel very much like your child that you kind of, give birth to and raise together. Um, every creator owned book is sort of like, starting a small business,
Hmm.
with this other person. So it's certainly more collaborative, and it becomes harder to say, to pull an idea apart and say, well, this part's the writers, this part's the artist. It all just kind of blends together, and yeah, you build this thing together. I mean, those are the kind of creator owned projects I'd like to do. Um, Certainly the ones that are, most exciting.
Hmm. As a writer, what are you more drawn to, be it structure or emotion? I mean, when you start, what's in your head? You're drawn to the emotion, to the characters, or you think about the structure first and then you delve into that?
No, I'm not really a structure guy, I don't think. I think I do very much start with characters and emotions, um, and kind of go from there. I mean, certainly I work to create a structure, and, I believe in planning and outlining, and, um, I'm not one of those writers who, thinks the muse just speak to me and tell me where to go. I mean, it's I think it's true that if you get yourself in that world enough, and know become come to know those characters enough, it will start to feel like those characters can lead you where they want to go. Um, but your characters can also lead you into some really dumb, obvious places, and sometimes you have to tell them like, no, no, we're not going to go there. We're going to go a place more interesting than that. Um,
Have they ever
and
argued
it's
back at
all
you?
work.
Have your
Sorry.
characters ever argued back at you saying, no, no, this is the wrong direction, we're going in that direction?
I don't think. I mean, that makes it sound like you just got voices in your head,
You're a writer. Of course you have voices in your head. Not in the literal sense, but
well, the voice is me, though. It's usually me sitting here talking to myself. No, I don't like, I don't like ever hearing the talk of like, well, it was just kind of magic. It just flowed through me, like the muses were speaking to me that day, and I was just typing as it came out. That makes it seem like it's magic, like it's not something everyone can do, and that there's not a lot of work involved. And I mean, I think every writer has had those days where it feels like you're like, man, I don't know where this is coming from. It's sure coming a lot easier today. But for me, it's because I worked to get to that point. It
uh-huh.
doesn't just happen. It's not like the stars are aligned that day. It's like you did a lot of work. Of Now, by work, can mean that can sometimes just be sitting here staring off into space. Like it's not work that most people would recognize as work, but I swear, if I sit here and stare off into space for an hour, like eventually I'll get a check in the mail because of what I did when I was staring. Like that is part of the job, like that's to me that's the hardest part, right? Is like I always think of it like I've got a stove in my head with a bunch of eyes burning and stuff simmering, right?
Mhm.
And each pot that's simmering is a different book I'm working on, and you just need enough space for them all to simmer for a while. That you got to be able to think about them and figure them out and get
Mhm.
in that mindset, um, so that they cook properly, so that they taste good when they come out. So I think that just letting things, giving things the space in my head to you know to boil and bubble and cook properly.
Mhm.
That's the toughest part of the job. So by the time I actually sit down to write a script, hopefully I know what I'm doing, what the big beats are, what needs to happen. Because then the hardest work is done.
Mhm.
Just the typing part is the fun part.
Yeah.
Well, it's all the fun part, but that's the easier part, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I understand. Do you think that like I don't know if you know this one, but the plumber analogy also works in this case? Meaning, a plumber goes to a home, changes whatever in the washing machine, takes him 5 minutes, charges $100, and like, oh,
Right,
you're charging me something $100 for a 5 minute job. It's like, no, sorry, I'm charging you $100 for the 20 years I've been learning how to do
right,
this in
exactly.
5 minutes.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
simmering in your brain. The analogy for me is you've been working at this for so long that you have methods which don't involve to be writing. It involve all the experience that has gone through your brain to solve things in a certain way, right?
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, like any muscles, the more you use them, the stronger they get, right? So I
Yeah.
think that process gets more efficient. I mean, I've been doing this full time now for 15 years, so that's a lot of days where I'm sitting staring into space. So those those muscles have gotten a lot stronger. I think that the I can do that more efficiently than I'm sure I used to be able to.
Mhm.
Um, but it's still a process. It doesn't mean you get to cut around the process. Like you still have to devote the time and the headspace to it. So for me, it gets to be a problem just if I've got too much stuff, you know, kind of cooking at one time.
Mhm.
It gets to be hard to devote enough time and space to each one of them.
Mhm. And talking about those muscles, do you feel like you use the same muscles when it's to create your own book or a company owned book, or it's different muscles because you know one is personal and the other is company owned? I guess it's the same muscles in the same way, but do you think that sometimes you need to make a switch?
They're the same but different. Certainly, my process is the same. I don't do anything different. It's not like I'm more invested in one than I am in the other. I mean, if I am, I always feel like, well, why am I doing the one I'm not invested in?
Hmm.
If it's just like, well, this is a work for hire book and this is a creator owned book. Yeah, they're different, but I want to be just as invested in Thor or the Avengers as I am in something that's mine. Um, Otherwise, I feel like I should give that job to somebody else.
Yeah, that's the second part. That's the second part of it. Is a lot of I get a lot of people asking why you guys, like you, Donnie, and any of the others who are doing work for Marvel and also Image or any other creator own, or any of the other guys. And I always tell them because it's fun. If they weren't having fun and love their work, they wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Right? And by the end of the day, is you find, even if it's different muscles. My question is, you still love both, right? You can love both at the same time. They are not exclusive. Exclude them.
Right. Yeah. I've never felt like I needed to choose or that there was any reason to choose. I mean, as long as I'm having fun doing both, nobody at Marvel makes me write stories I don't want to write. Um, I have a really good relationship with Marvel and like the stuff I do there. So why should I stop?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not going to choose one side of the fence or the other. So yeah, I love being able to do both. I feel like I've been doing both for pretty much my entire career,
Yeah.
and I don't expect that to change.
Yeah. I usually ask this to to writers who've on both parts of the fence, because sometimes the fans, the fans always like to pick sides for whatever reason, and they feel that if you're doing your own thing, why do you keep doing the other one? And I'm like,
Sure.
why do they have to choose?
Well, there are plenty of creators who feel that way too.
Yeah.
But I always, Grant Morrison has been my favorite comic book writer since I was um, uh, pretty young, since I first discovered his Doom Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I always kind of look at Grant as sort of an ideal to me. And Grant is the guy who's defined not by any one project, not by any one work for hire project or creator owned project, but by an incredible diversity of projects. I think if you had 5 Grant Morrison fans and you ask them like, what's your favorite book or what's like the perfect Grant Morrison book, you would get 5 different
Absolutely.
answers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, so I've always looked to him of like, well, he never chose, like he does whatever the hell he wants to do,
Absolutely.
and everything he does feels like Grant, but also feels very different than the thing he did before.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always wanted to be that. I want to do what projects feel right to me at the time, um, and I never worry about like, well, I really want to write Spider-Man or I really want to write Batman or I've got a couple of characters like that. Conan was a character I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get to at some point, but it's never about chasing that. It's about what feels right, in this moment. Whether that's a work for hire book or a creator owned book. And I love being able to do both. It is, they're the same muscles, but they are different. So, one week if I'm writing an Avengers script and then I wake up the next week and I'm starting on a script for the Goddamned for Guéra, like those are very different experiences. There's a lot of there are different muscles in my head that I'm getting to use. So I like that. I like that diversity. I don't want to just do the same kind of script week after week after week. As a consumer, I'm like that. I like all different kinds of movies and shows and different kinds of music. I don't kind of focus in on just one thing. So I think I always want to be like that as a creator, always working on different kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. And also in Grant's case, or in Alan's case, and in others, or Garth, or whatever, you can always, and in your case, I was going to say, you can always find the voice, even if it's the voice of the creator, even if it's a completely different project, your voice is still there. And the best part of it is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know from Grant and the others, they don't try to imbue their voice. It's just something that is natural. It's You always know it's them, even if it's completely different. Like Grant's JLA has nothing in common with, I don't know, Invisibles,
Right.
but there's something that tells you it's Grant. Is it the same for you? I mean, as a writer, you don't try to to force your voice into it, but it just flows naturally.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't try to. I don't want my books to all sound the same.
Hmm.
I try not to. Sometimes when I read something, I can't help but hear the writer's voice, maybe because I know the writer. Um, so I prefer if it doesn't, if you don't hear me, when you're reading it. Certainly, every writer will have tendencies and tropes and um, things, common dots you can connect between the different projects. And yeah, with Grant, I think there's some just sort of fervor or mad imagination that links his stuff together, no matter what it is.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'd love it if somebody reads three different books of mine and not realize that they were written by the same person.
Hmm.
But I think you can draw plenty of lines between my stuff.
Yeah. For you, storytelling is maybe this is a weird question, but for you, storytelling is a symphony, is progressive rock, or jazz?
um, I don't. I'm not sure. I don't know if I would think of it as any of those.
Ouch.
Um, I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by storytelling. 'Cause, I
A
mean,
comics
that's a pretty
storytelling. I
broad.
mean,
Oh yeah,
let me explain. For me, it's always been a symphony because of the up and downs, the pacing, the moments of
sure.
quietness and relax, and then boom, you go up again. So for me, always comics storytelling has felt, at least, like we can say, at least superhero comics. They always felt like a symphony. That's why I was
Right.
trying to ask if it was for you that, a symphony or something different.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess when I think of a symphony, I think of a symphony. I think of a lot of players involved,
Uh-huh.
and my comic experience is pretty much always a handful of people in a room,
Hmm.
proverbial room together, because many times we will never be all physically in the same room together. With Scalped, we did 60 something issues, and we have never all been together in the same space at the same time. I mean, I wasn't in the same physical space with Guéra for a couple years. We were probably halfway through the series before we ever met. But we because he was in Barcelona. I'm in Kansas City. Julia, the colorist, was in London.
Hmm.
Jock, who did the covers, was in England. Will, our editor, was in New York. So we've still never all been together in any one place at the same time. Like a few different iterations, but never all of us. So, but even then, it still feels like it was sort of a small group of people in a room together. So for me, maybe it is more like jazz. I guess I don't really know. I'm not a jazz aficionado, but either that or like a solo acoustic set where you invite a few other friends up to play with you.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Or an intimate music quartet,
right,
playing the works of Mozart, in a small room with your violins and all that.
right. So even when I'm doing a project with Marvel, um, I mean, I've been at Marvel for a long time. I have a good relationship with folks. Um, I generally kind of get to do what I want to do. So it still does generally feel like a little group of people in a room
Yeah.
making this book happen. It does. I'm not getting notes from people up the tree at Disney that I don't know. I'm pretty much never. I never get notes from people I don't know.
Hmm.
So it still feels like a more intimate affair, even with the biggest company in comics.
Yeah, and that's also like an amazing part of being doing comics and not movie scripts or anything like that, right? I mean, it's just
Right.
it's just between you and your artist. your editor and your colorist and your letter, of course, you are like the whole group doing, between big brackets, the movie. You set the budget,
Right.
you set the pacing, you set everything, and it's not you are one of the 1,000 wheels on the movie set, right?
Sure. Yeah, that I think that's the biggest adjustment coming from comics to doing anything in Hollywood is, certainly nothing um, in Hollywood is going to feel very intimate in that way. You lose that intimacy and that immediacy, like um, I know plenty of people who worked in Hollywood for years and have written lots and lots of stuff, but just a small part of it that's ever been produced and come to fruition. And from coming from comics, we're spoiled where I write a script and a few months later, it's going to be on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah,
Um, so that I mean, there's the pluses and minuses to that, um, to either kind, right? Like the sometimes the momentum of comics is hard, and there are times where you'll be like, well, let's just slow down and take a little more time to this. Um, but it's a serialized medium, and that's not the way it works.
yeah.
Um, but I do cherish that intimacy.
hmm It's I remember when you're talking about that not being intimate, in doing a movie. A Spanish actor, I think it was Antonio Banderas. One of the first times he did a movie in the US, he was told, "Oh, this is a small project, an indie one. It's compared to the other stuff we do, you will
Right.
probably do or you've done, etc." It's like, "Oh, how many people is involved in doing this movie?" "Ah, no, only around 600 people." And he was like, "Wait, that's intimate? We do it with 40 people in Spain." How 600 is intimate? And then that's when he realized maybe what indie, independent movies mean in Spain is not what they mean in America.
Right.
It's a whole bigger machine that has to involve a lot more people, right? But in terms
Right.
of comics, it's also that freedom that you have. That's that, when somebody at Marvel, for example, calls you and says, "Hey, do you want to do this project? Is it about the character at all, or is it in your head? I had a story to tell with that character." It's about you having the story to tell, or about, "Oh, I want to work with," I think you said it before. It's not that I want to work with Batman or the other. It's the story, right?
Yeah, for me, it's always been about what feels right in that moment. I don't have a briefcase full of story ideas for characters. Like I said, there's a short list of characters I've been a fan of for years. Like Conan was high on that list that I always feel like, yeah, someday I'd like to get the chance to work on that character. But it's still a thing. I kind of I'm waiting until the right moment, to do that. So like with Thor, when I was offered Thor, or well, wasn't offered, like it was in that Marvel Now period, it was more like everything was up for grabs, and it was a question of like, what would you like to do? Um, and I had been kind of penciled in to do Captain America for a while, but then suddenly all the books were up for grabs, and in that moment, I thought I'd really like to do Thor, and I'd never had that thought before, never a huge Thor fan before. Um, but I read the Simonson stuff when I was a kid, and then I really liked Matt Fraction's Ages of Thunder books that he did. There was like 3 or 4 one shots, kind of before he took over Thor, um, and I read those and really liked them. And that was the first time I had any kind of sparks where I thought like, oh, I get it. I get Thor. That'd be fun to write. So just when that opportunity arose, that was the book that the character that felt right in the moment. And I still didn't have a story. I think I had Thor, and I knew Esad was going to be drawing it before I knew like, oh, what the hell am I going to do? Like I had to figure something out. Um, but if I couldn't have figured out a story, then I wouldn't have been doing Thor. But um, I mean, that to me is the fun part, is what feels right at this moment in time. Where's my head at? What's the situation? And then the challenge is, okay, well, can you come up with a cool story?
Hmm.
Um, but it's never for me. It's rarely ever been the other way around, where I'm like, man, I got this story for X character I've been carrying around for years, and I really want to do it. I mean, with creator owned stuff, I do that where I carry ideas around for a long time, but
Hmm.
hasn't been like that for work for hire stuff. It's more, sometimes it's like, I have a great relationship with this editor. I'd like to work with them. Okay, well, what characters do they have? Okay, well, can I figure out some stories for those characters? Um,
And
yeah.
turning back the clock, um, when you were a kid, why did you decided? What made you said comics is my love. This is what I want to do, instead of any other way of expressing yourself as a writer. Being novels, being theater, being movies, etc., etc.
Um, I think it was just comics were always there. I mean, the first comics, the oldest comics I've got are ones my mom bought me before I knew how to read. Um, so I think comics were always a part of my life, and they never disappeared. I've been reading comics. Like, I never had a period where I fell out and stopped reading and came back. Like, it's been steady.
Mhm.
My literally my entire reading life, there have been comics there. And so I knew pretty young that I wanted to write, that I really enjoyed writing. I think I had some good grade school teachers who encouraged me to write, even though I was writing weird shit, the kind of shit that'd probably get me put on some kind of watch list today. But so I always wanted to do that. I had no idea how does one go about getting a job in comics. No clue. And I um, lived out in the boondocks in the small southern town in Alabama. So I did pursue other writing. I thought I would, at one point, I would want to write novels. I when I went to college, I majored in journalism. Thought I would go into that. Took me like one semester of journalism classes before I was like, this is not. I don't think this is what I want to do. Dropped out of college for a bit. Had some kind of lost years. Um, but the desire for comics never left. Even though I was trying to focus on writing in other places, I was always still reading comics, still loving comics. So then you know, it was 20 years ago now. Marvel announced this talent search contest they were doing, which was this weird thing they'd never done before, and they really haven't done since. Um, so you just typed up. They were kind of different. There was a version at the Wizard World Chicago, and there was one at San Diego Comic Con. So the Chicago one, you typed up a one-page synopsis for a Wolverine story and dropped it in a box. So I did that, um, and then kind of forgot about it because it took a while. I then got a call on my phone one day from um, Mike Martz at Marvel telling me I'd won. So um, I think that for me, that desire and that passion and that drive was never disappeared. Even when I thought, like, well, maybe I'll write novels, or maybe I'll be a journalist. I always ultimately wanted to write comics. It just took a while to figure out, well, how the hell do you do that?
Mhm.
And even that talent search contest didn't exactly lead to overnight superstardom. It kind of got my foot in the door, and really, for me, for the first time, just encouraged me to feel like, oh, maybe I can do this. Um, I had a pretty, for what me felt like this kind of profound moment when I was in college, where I went to this writers conference. I got to meet Ray Bradbury, which was a highlight. Um, but while I was there, went there by myself. I'm this young college kid, just know I want to write in some form or another. And I went into that feeling like, I don't know how to be a good enough writer. I want to be a good enough writer to do that, to warrant somebody's time, whether that's an agent or an editor or some, a customer paying money to buy this book. So I just felt like I want to be good enough, and I was kind of dismayed by so much of the the stuff that was going on there, the panels and the other people. It seemed like so many people were convinced they were good enough. They've written the next big, novel, The Bridges of Madison County, or whatever the hell they're like. I've got it. I just need to know, well, how do I get an agent? How do I get it in front of people?
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like, well, I haven't read any of these books, but I can guarantee you don't all got it. Like maybe somebody does, but definitely all of you don't. So to me, I mean, I always felt like being good enough is the hard part, right? Like meeting an agent or an editor or getting your foot in the door, like people figure that out all the time, and there's different ways to do that. That's hard too.
Yeah.
But it's not as hard as just being good enough to warrant those people's attention in the first place. So to me, I always just felt like I'm not good enough yet, and I just want to keep writing until I feel like I am. So I think winning that talent search contest was the first time I felt like, okay, like maybe I'm good enough. I can take a stab at the breaking in part.
Mm-hmm.
So the talent search was a big step in me breaking in, but again, didn't really lead to anything else. It just encouraged me to keep working and keep pitching and be persistent and then kind of broke in again with Will Dennis at Vertigo, which brought me back to Marvel. But I mean, I still believe that. I still believe like if you're focused on being good enough, being your own harshest critic, not in a way where you hold yourself back, where you feel like everything you do is terrible. I mean, definitely, I think all creatives have those days where they feel like everything they do is terrible. But just being a good appraiser of your own work and knowing where and how you need to get better, and being honest about when you feel affected by your work or when you don't. That's the hard stuff. If you can do that, you can figure out how to break in, especially these days when there are kind of more avenues to do that.
Yeah.
Like people figure that stuff out all the time, but what helps you do that second part is when you're good enough to warrant somebody's attention.
Yeah, but in your case, I guess as a creator, as an artist, there's also a part of being self-aware, but not self-deprecating at all times, right? You had to find that balance between both things.
For sure. I mean, there's something egotistical about doing a pursuit like this in the first place. I mean, it's very much about like, hey, look at this thing I did. You're standing on stage in some sense, whether you want to literally stand on stage or not. Like it's still like, hey, I did this thing and you should look at it. So yeah, there's got to be like a little bit of ego. You got to again feel like, oh, this is good enough that I need to show people. But certainly we're all notoriously tortured, and we're all the weirdos who didn't fit in. So some of us more so than others. Plenty of us who don't seem to function well in normal society. I mean, I've got no like plan B. I've got no fallback vocation. I have no, like I was having a conversation with friends the other day, and they were dividing up skills for if the apocalypse comes, like who's in charge of hunting, who's in charge. And I'd say I got nothing. Like I can tell stories for you guys at night over the campfire. Like I'll preserve our our culture in story. But I got no practical skills. Like I got no job skills. This is all I got.
That reminds me of, they ask Neil deGrasse Tyson, in Star Talk Radio, about, in evolution terms, if there's an apocalypse, what do you need to survive? And he was like, well, you need a weapon that, you can throughout the distance, blah blah blah. But he said the most important thing is you have to have a special ability nobody else has, because if you don't have an ability, you're in that group. You're going the first one left behind. If in terms of
Sure.
survival, you gotta have the special thing. And I was
Right.
thinking, okay, I'm dead.
Yeah, I mean, I can make pretty good tiki drinks, so maybe there's that. As long as we got booze and
Oh, if there's
fruit.
booze, I will survive. Yes, if
Yeah,
there's booze involved.
but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else I got.
And what keeps you? And we turn the clock back to the beginning. And what keeps you coming back to comics? Why do you say every day I'll keep doing this? Is the passion still there every day?
Yeah, I mean, again, I hope so. Hopefully the day it's not, I find something else to do. I mean, it's kind of for me. Again, it's always been there since I was a kid. I've never stopped reading. I've never stopped loving comics. Um, I never feel limited by comics. You can do whatever you want, right? Like,
Mhm,
I mean, I feel like I've worked on a lot of different kinds of stories. And again, that intimacy, that immediacy, to where it's a little group of us. We get together, we come up with this thing, and then I go to the local comic book store, and there it is.
mhm,
And that part never gets old either. Like that, every time I go in the shop, and it's like, oh shit, I wrote that. Like it never stops being fun.
mhm.
So I mean, I don't envision a day where any of that stops. I mean, certainly my career may look different. I may be doing more of this or less of that, or maybe working at a different company or doing more creator owned stuff. I don't know. Like those things will change as it go. Um, and I will pursue other opportunities as they come up, in terms of Hollywood stuff, or I would still love to write a novel at some point.
Mhm.
A good one. I've written some crappy ones in the past that hopefully nobody ever reads, but I'd like to try to write a good one. Um, so I want other things. I want to do other things like that. Diversify a little bit. Certainly, I think that one of the lessons of this past year, when we saw our entire industry shut down, was it pays to be diversified in what you're doing and how you reach your audience. Um, so certainly, I'm interested and aware of all those kind of things, but regardless of any of that, I don't see myself ever leaving comics or
Mhm.
stepping away from comics to do something else. Like I will always be here in one form or another.
Yeah.
That's my plan, unless I get run out, and then you know,
Nah.
if they tell me you suck now, go home. But short of that, I'm not going anywhere.
And you just talked about the freedom in terms of comics, in terms of the narrative of the kind of stories. I always say you guys knew where this was coming because to the fans, because I always say that comics is the only art form that can defy Einstein's theory of relativity. Because in the others, the arrow of time, and as Einstein said, is always pointing in the right direction. I don't know if for you this is the direction I'm pointing in, but you know what I mean.
Right,
The
right,
clock always goes forward, never goes back. You're watching a movie. Shut up, Siri. I don't know why you activated. You're watching a movie, and the movie just goes, and you're reading a
right.
book, and the book just goes. But in comics, you can direct, as a writer and as an artist, how time moves, how fast it moves, depending on the size and shape of the panels. But also, you can decide as a writer, you know what, this issue is going to be 22 pages happening at the same second, or I'm going to
Sure.
jump back and forth, and it always feels natural. Do you think? Do you agree on that? That the comics, in the sense of what you just said, you can do anything in comics. There's no limitation with the language. Are different and unique compared to the other narrative art forms I'm talking about.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You're only limited by what you can get someone to draw. Like um, absolutely. I think we can do anything. I think that's part of that magic of the language of comics that does make it so much different than everything else you're talking about. And I think we don't always take advantage of all that. even the language of comics, I think we've moved away from, and somewhat. But I think we should always embrace all of that as much as we can. And for me, I'm just trying to always be most excited and invested in whatever I'm working on now, and feel like whatever this book I'm about to do next is going to be the best thing I've ever done, and to always try to push beyond what I've done before, do something a bit different, and something that hopefully does embrace and take advantage of the language of comics as much as it can.
And also, in talking about that, how important it is for you, because it is for artists, but for you as a writer, how important is pattern recognition for you? Because I think that's one of the biggest and most important things comics have. Like I always say the example, we're in the caves, that bush is rustling. Oh, maybe there's an animal there that's going to kill me. So I have to jump and run away. So for you, just because as creators, as you say, as I said before, the comic creator is a manipulator of time and space at all times, but it also is the art that I think needs more collaboration in the part of the audience, of the fans. So how do you think how important I think is to just give tips to the fan, to the reader, that they can complete instead of giving them the whole information?
Sure, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of different from project to project, I guess. I mean, to me, you do whatever's right for that story, right? To tell that story, that's kind of the most important thing. Um, and you use whatever tools you need to do that, and those might not be the same as what you do for the next book, but it should never be about the tools kind of leading the way. It's very much in service. What is the best way to tell this particular story?
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether that means you follow all the rules or you throw all the rules out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you just got to figure out what works to tell that story at that moment in time.
Yeah, what I was meaning, in case it wasn't clear, because I think I phrased it really, really bad. I didn't make sense. Didn't make sense at all. Like, if you think that it's better to suggest and not to tell, or again, it depends on
Oh,
the story.
sure. I mean, I'm always in favor of letting the art speak for itself where you can. I mean, I think I always, it sounds weird, but I always love those moments where I can look at like lettered art and realize, like, oh, I should take this out. Like, I should cut these lines. Like, we don't need this. Um, Feels weird to say, like, I'm going to take my words out of it, but it feels good, and that like, oh, this is working. I don't need this. It's much better without this line, without this caption or whatever. I love those moments where it feels like the storytelling's all there. So yeah, generally I feel like, you know, um, let the art speak for itself. But
Mhm.
at the same time, there are times where, maybe you feel like you need to spell things out a little more. Again, it's just sort of how do we tell this story? What works to tell this story? I kind of go, by what feels right um, in that moment for that page.
Mhm.
Um,
Uh, when I was talking to Yannick the last time, Yannick and other artists, they told me that when they work with Grant, they never know what's going to happen in terms of, for example, Yannick told me that in one scene, I think it was in Batman Incorporated, he just drew a fish in one side of the page,
right.
just as a joke, and then Grant saw it and picked up on it and created a story based on that. Another creator told me
Oh,
that he
cool.
put some characters in Green Lantern, I think it was, in the background that weren't even on the script, just to fill the space. And Grant saw them and said, "Oh, I need to create a story for that." How often does that happen to you? There's something that the artist leaves there, and you suddenly like, "Oh,
Right.
I like that. That gives me an idea to create or enlarge on something."
I don't have like as big an example as that, but I think that happens all the time, like in
Hmm.
different ways. Again, I think it's that idea that when you have a real back and forth collaboration, like you can't pull it apart. It becomes very much something that you're doing together as opposed to just one or the other of you directing it. You get to that magical place where you're both invested in it. You're both putting ideas into it. So I mean, certainly with working with Guéra, he and I have worked together a lot on Scalped and the Goddamned. Like, there's so much that Guéra adds to it. I remember maybe the first arc of Scalped, the kind of the first big fight scene we had. I wrote this big gun battle. I was watching a lot of Peck and Paw movies. Like, I was trying to do like Peck and Paw style cuts, jumping back and forth between the different action, and kind of worked laying out this 5-page fight scene. And Gary didn't draw any of it. Like, he drew he did his own version of it, which was way better than mine. So I that was the first moment where I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I can't complain because his is way better. And so it's that's the fun part. That's the part where it looks way better than it does in my head. And it's kind of you get different variations of that depending on the artist that you're working with. I've worked with Chris Pachalo a lot too on Marvel stuff. We did Wolverine, the X-Men, and Doctor Strange, and Chris was the first artist I ever worked in more of a Marvel style with, where it was more still not just complete. It's not like I just give him a paragraph of plot and he goes and draws it. It's still I'd kind of break it down by groups of pages. So I might say page, like for pages 1 through 5, this stuff happens, and I would generally have most of the dialogue in there too. And then it's just up to him to kind of break it down into panels. Because I think that the first issue of Wolverine the X-Men we did, I just wrote regular full script, and I think I wrote maybe 1 splash page, and then Chris drew like 5. Because he'd also draw those those like crazy 18 panel pages that I would never have the guts to write for any artist. So at that point I was like, we figured out like doing that more Marvel style, and I think that's what I did for pretty much everything else he and I have ever done together. Which works. Some artists don't want that. Some artists don't want to have to go through, and they feel almost like you're making them do more work that you should be doing, which I get. So it's kind of whatever works.
Yeah, and in Chris's case, in Chris's case, is just letting him go crazy, because that's who he is, right? He needs that space to just breathe. Let me know what is going on, and then I'll just go crazy and pace it my way. If not, it couldn't be Chris Bachalo, right?
Right, exactly. So in that, you're always going to get moments and things that were not in the script at all, that are there, that happen, that you can pick up and roll with, and again, no one will ever know like which part was you, which part. That happens a lot. Mike Del Mundo did that a lot on Thor. Like, I love that, working with artists who will clearly are so excited and invested in it as you are, that they want to make it theirs too. They want to put some of themselves in it, which I think is great.
Yeah. Let's go, if you're okay, let's go with the guys' questions so they don't kill me. Let me see. Felipe González Hernández. I don't know. I think you're missing a part of the question, Felipe. We're only reading the second part, so please write again. Eduardo Sacristan Puig says, wow, what a great opportunity. Hello, Eduardo, agente de Marvel. How much do you think you're going to stay in Avengers and Marvel in general? I love all your work, and he says in big capital letters, all of it.
Cool, thank you. How long will I stay on Avengers and at Marvel? I don't have a direct concrete plan. I mean, certainly I'm still on Avengers for the foreseeable future. I kind of know where what my run is building towards. I couldn't tell you exactly how long it'll take to get there. I think I have an idea.
Mhm.
In terms of Marvel, I don't know. I mean, I'm very happy there. I'm still under contract for at least a couple more years. Um, so I have no complaints. I have no desires to jump ship right now. I'm still really excited and invested in what I'm doing there and who I get to work with. Um, but we'll see. Like I said, I think I'll always be interested in doing um, work for hire stuff and the mix with creator owned work. The balance may look different at one point or another, but right now I'm still just excited doing what I'm doing.
Mhm. I can read the full thing now. Felipe González Hernandez was asking, "Hi, Mr. Aaron. Did you plan everything that you have done on your run in Thor? I loved your Thor and female Thor. It was really appealing. Do you compare yourself with Walter Simonson run or try to homage him at all?" And I explain what I meant. You have a long run like him and also focus a lot in Asgard and Midgard with a good balance of characters and stories.
Thanks. Yeah, I think anybody who's working on Thor has to be influenced by Walt. I don't think there's any way around that. And certainly, I loved his run. His run was really my only kind of Thor touch point initially. But once I got the gig, I went back and read all the original Kirby stuff and loved it. That's some of my favorite Jack Kirby stuff. Um, is Thor, especially there's a period there kind of around that original Mangog story that feels like Jack really firing on all cylinders. Um, which again, reading that story was why I teased bringing the Mangog in for like I don't know 5 years before I did. Um, but did I have it all planned out? I mean, I planned out a lot of it actually. Some so yeah, that's my Thor notebook. So this is um, pretty much every story I did is in here, plus some I didn't get to. Hmm. This is this one was about a redneck family of storm giants that invade New York, so we didn't quite we didn't quite get to that one.
Well, you can always come. You can always come back after a few
Right,
years being away.
right. Um, but when I got Thor again, I did not have a story initially, and kind of came up with that big God Butcher, God Bomb story because I wanted to do something that was big and epic and cosmic, and I wanted to lean into the idea of Thor being a god. So I wanted to do something that showed, how is a Thor story different than a Captain America story or a Spider-Man story, and Thor's the god of thunder. So this is a story that takes place over the course of thousands and thousands of years, and then you get different versions of that same character all hanging out together and fighting the same bad guy. So that was kind of the initial idea, and going from that, I mainly just wanted to once I felt like okay, this is sort of shown like who Thor is and what a Thor story is. Then it was about well, like what makes Thor different in terms of the setting of his story. Beyond just you got Asgard, of course, but he's also got all these other realms, and I didn't know one realm from another. When I got the gig, I couldn't name them all. I didn't know like what does this one look like, which one's made out of fire and which one's ice, and so if I didn't know that, I'm sure a lot of people reading the book didn't know that either. So I just wanted to do okay. Let's flesh out what do those realms look like. Who lives in them? Are they good guys or bad guys? What do they eat there? What do they wear? And that kind of led to the War of the Realms, which again took like 6 years to get there. Um, oh, did I lose you?
No, no, I'm here.
Oh, something just popped up on my screen. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm here.
um, so yeah, I mean, it took a long time to get to the actual war, but it was always about kind of world building and just showing. again, this is what makes Thor's beat different than Spider-Man swinging through Manhattan, right? Like Thor goes to Muspelheim and Niflheim and all these other realms, and so I just kind of wanted to define that. And the other, I think the other big thing was always just writing about the idea of worthiness and what it meant to be a worthy god and what it meant to Thor every time he picked up that hammer. And um, that always, I knew that was always leading to a story where one day Thor wouldn't be able to pick up the hammer
Mm-hmm.
and someone else would. Um, so that idea was kind of in there from the get go. And I think going back and when I went back and reread all that original Lee Kirby stuff, um, I mean that first story begins with Donald Blake going in this cave and picking up this stick, and it turns into the hammer, and then he turns into Thor, and it's got this promise written on it. And that was kind of a dynamic that Stan and Jack got away from pretty quick, and then Walt brought back kind of right out of the gate in his run. So I was always intrigued by that. Um, and Jane Foster was pretty much the only person I ever really considered to be the one to come in and pick up the hammer. And when Thor was unworthy, and to me the most fun and most unexpected part of that was just how much I liked writing that kind of old. It felt like a kind of classic dynamic. This is a character who's got a secret identity. Um, she picks up this hammer, and if she gets it separated from the hammer, she changes back. Um, and this is killing her. Literally transforming into Thor's, making her worse every time. So altogether, it felt like a very kind of old school Marvel dynamic. Which was really fun, which I really loved.
Did you know from the beginning that you were going to turn her into the Valkyrie? I mean, that you knew that she was going to be, more and more ill because of changing into Thor, etc. Her illness.
Right.
Had you planned already? Okay, but she's then going to become the Valkyrie, or that wasn't planned?
No, I wouldn't say that was planned from the get go. Again, with the Jane story, it's sort of, when we started it, a lot of it was like, well, we'll do this and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
People,
Yeah.
if everybody hates it and sales plummet, then Jane gets 6 issues.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I had ideas for stories I wanted to do, but it was sort of like, well, we'll see. But then it did really well, and I got to tell her story the way I wanted to tell it. And as I got to the end, I just didn't. I never wanted her to die. I mean, I guess she does die, but I never wanted to be the end of Jane's
Yeah.
story, right? It's the end of the Mighty Thor story, but it's not the end of Jane's story. And yeah, after that, just sort of, I think from one of the Marvel retreats, we came up with the idea of Jane becoming the next Valkyrie, which I love the idea of Jane being able to stick around as a prominent character,
Mm-hmm.
and worked great with what I was already setting up in War of the Realms. Is a great place to kind of spin her out as the new Valkyrie. And I've still enjoyed being a part of telling her story, with Al Ewing and with Torin, who's doing I'm doing been doing the book with, and now we're doing the new King in Black stuff, and maybe some stuff after that I can't talk about yet. But so I love still being a part of Jane's story. And I mean, it's only going to get better for Jane, with that movie coming out, and now I think 2022. But
Yeah. I was going to ask about that. How did you feel when you were told Taika was going to use Jane?
I was excited. I mean, I love Taika. I loved Ragnarok. I really loved Jojo Rabbit. That was probably my favorite movie of the year. So yeah, it's really cool and exciting. I mean that stuff to me is all just, it's like gravy, right? Like it's, the most important thing for me was getting to do the book, getting to tell the story the way I wanted to tell it. getting to work with Russell Dowderman and Matt Wilson and everybody who was a part of that. That was the most important thing. Somebody else coming along and saying, "Hey, we think that's cool and we want to use it for the movie." Sounds awesome. Sounds
Yeah.
great. But no matter what happens, our book is still there. That story we did is there, and it's the way we wanted it to be told.
And if they Marvel releases again your hardcovers and softcovers with Jane as Thor, when they release the movie and you get a lot of royalties, that's not bad either.
Sure. I mean, again, this is my only vocation. I got no viable job skills beyond this, so I need to continue to make this work for me.
Okay, Blake Royval asks you, what is the influence or meaning of Blood Meridian to you?
Well, I love Blood Meridian. It's maybe my favorite. No, I don't know. I don't know what I'd say my favorite McCarthy novel is. But I mean, I think just Cormac McCarthy as a writer had a profound impact on me. Um, I think he and James Elroy have said have been my favorite living writers for a long time. Um, I think McCarthy's one of those guys. I'd say is an influence. I don't know. He's also someone who's so good that when you read his work, it makes you want to quit because you feel like Jesus, I can never do that. Like McCarthy is so good about these, what can be pretty short, simple lines that just feel so incredibly profound. Literally sometimes where you got to like put the book down for a minute and just be like, Jesus Christ, like let that sink,
Yeah.
sink in for a minute before you pick it up again. Um, I don't know. I think I might say The Road is probably my favorite. Um, I think reading that as a new dad, um, it's a pretty deep experience, and that
I,
that
I,
movie's
to be
amazing.
honest, I have to stop. When
Yeah, to
I
stop.
think my daughter was 6 months old or something when I was trying to read or watch the movie, both of them. I was, and I had to stop. I was like, right now I can't read this. I read it, again
Sure, I get that.
a
Right.
year ago, and I was like, yeah, I understand why I couldn't finish it back in the day.
What I felt the same, but also is one of those books where you like I couldn't stop. I also
Mhm.
couldn't stop. Sometimes you ever do it where you're reading a book and like it's almost like I feel like I can't leave the characters in this space where they are right now. Let me let me read this chapter. Maybe things get better, and then I feel like okay, I can leave you guys there. I'm gonna go to bed. We'll catch up again tomorrow. But that one, you're like, fuck, like
Yeah.
I can't leave them. I can't leave them here. It's never going to get better. Um, yeah, that book's also got a couple spots that still just give me chills when just lines, simple moments that are just so deep and profound. Um,
Yeah, because with McCarthy, for at least for me, is there's no way to escape it. I mean, it's just boom. He is profound but bleak at the same time. There's no flower in, if that makes sense to you. It's just this is what it is. Take it or leave it. Is it profound and bleak at the same time? You know what I mean?
right. Yes. Yes. I mean, there's not a lot of flowery language. I mean, sometimes he could write an incredible sentence about a sunset, but he always just kind of cuts to the heart of things.
Yeah.
I think when I think for the longest time, I was more of like um, always in terms of like my prose, always felt like more was better. I
Mhm.
was like the opposite of the Hemingway um, philosophy, but I think that's definitely changed over the years. I mean, I love William Faulkner, and I love like Faulkner will kind of cram a bunch of sentences together into these jumbles, which are really beautiful. But that's hard to do, and I don't think many people can do that well. So I think I definitely lean more towards the Hemingway variety, and Elroy's a good example of that too. I mean, Elroy's some of his books read like a telegram,
Mhm.
like the words are missing,
Absolutely.
but they pack such a punch.
So you've become a member of the less is more church, right?
I think so. I mean, again, I never really write prose, so when I do try to tackle that novel, we'll see. But
Mhm.
I think so. And my cousin Gus Hasford was a big influence. He was a novelist. He wrote the book that Full Metal Jacket was based on, and his work is very much like that too.
Mhm.
Um, more kind of short and to the point.
Mhm. Neo Black says, "Greetings from Chile. I'm a fan of your work in Scalp, and I'm reading now Thor, and then I will continue reading Avengers. Thank you for your work."
Cool.
Geray Garcia Calades say, "Hello, Jason. I love all your work and wait for Volume 2 of The Gundam to be released in Spain." This one you already answered. You excited to see Jaina Thor in the big screen, but he also asked, "Where did you get the idea of turning her into Thor?"
Um, well, like I said, I kind of always knew I wanted to get to a point where Thor couldn't pick up the hammer again, and it would open the door for somebody else to come along and do it. I had a brief moment where I thought it would be Freya, where I thought it would be Thor's mom, um, but pretty quickly moved past that, and then Jane was kind of the only other person, and I'd already established in the book that Jane was dealing with breast cancer. Um, like I kind of brought her in just to touch base with her, show where she was at in the series, show that she and Thor were still close, but they weren't a couple. She was not his love interest anymore, and that she was dealing with this very real human problem, and Thor wanted to help, wanted to do whatever he could, wanted to move mountains to try to save her, and she was like, no, like it's not the way we're going to do this. Like, she's a medical professional, like she's going to fight it the way humans fight these kind of things. So we'd kind of already established that in the book, and I don't know, it just all kind of fit together, this idea of um her getting to finally kind of step out of the background of the Thor stories. She's been in Thor comics as long as Thor has. She's always been there.
Yeah.
Um, for so long she was just kind of the damsel in distress, and the someone that Loki would use against Thor in various plots. But so I like the idea of her kind of stepping into her own, and for someone who has always been a part of that world, finally getting to be the center of it and getting to be the character who's flying around swinging the hammer.
Mhm.
And then it also kind of everything clicked in terms of the cancer part of the story, and this idea of this um, skinny, physically um, weakened, sickened um, woman going through chemotherapy and battling breast cancer, being able to pick up this hammer and transform into this supremely powerful goddess of thunder.
Mhm.
That was a story I found really, really interesting. And I felt like, you know, people would respond to, and they very much have.
Mhm. And why you mentioned Freya? Why did you feel tempted to make, even briefly, Freya Thor?
I think I really liked Freya, and Freya had been a part of the book already. I liked she was still the All Mother at that point. Um, I don't know. I still there's something I like about that idea. I mean, I did a lot with Freya,
Mhm.
um, so hopefully I gave her some of those big moments. I don't know. I just like the idea of Thor's mom being the one, because she's all the stuff with Thor and Odin. So much of Thor's character, and so many Thor stories are about him butting heads with his dad, or trying to prove himself to his dad, or earn his dad's respect. And Freya's the one kind of standing off to the side, like, you know, you guys are being assholes. Or you guys are being crazy. She's looking at this like, why do you care so much about the stupid hammer? So I liked writing her relationship with Thor, and she is the more comforting and encouraging one in his life. So I don't know. I liked the idea of her being thrust again into the middle of that world, into the middle of that relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
that would change her relationship with Odin and change her relationship with Thor and everybody. But I think it's ultimately a much more interesting story if it's the human woman who picks up that hammer and all the stuff that Jane was having to deal with, as opposed to it just being another
Yeah,
god
another
or
god.
goddess.
Yeah. Germán and Bleduran, how many story arcs have you planned for the Goddamned? By the way, you and Guéra both are one of the best comic teams by far.
Thanks. I love working with Guéra. We don't have a set number of arcs for the Goddamned. I mean, as you can see, with this second volume as opposed to the first one, like it's some completely different characters, different setting within our kind of bigger overall pre-flood world. So it's kind of just as many of those as we want to do. Like you will see you'll see by the end of this second volume how it kind of connects to the first, and so there will be connections, and there is there is a final arc that where it kind of draws some of those threads together. But between here and there, it's really just about how many other stories do we want to do, and how much of that world do we want to explore.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to do an arc, I think, where it's standalone issues, where it's shorter stories, like jumping around within the pre-flood world. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see
So
as
in
we
a
go.
way, you guys know the destination, but you just want to enjoy the journey and see how long it takes, right?
Right, and it's every one of those stories won't be a part of like building something bigger. It's really just about jumping. We did a little of that in Scalped. Like one of my favorite issues of Scalped was, I think it was 35,
Mm-hmm.
where we just cut. Daniel Zazelle drew it. We just cut to this aging couple who lived on the reservation, and it was their story. Didn't connect to the larger narrative in any way whatsoever. Just kind of showed you what this setting was like. So I really loved that. And with the Goddamned, we have the opportunity to do a lot more of that. I've always thought of it as sort of like Ed Brubaker's Criminal, where it's kind of just a collection of different stories that are clearly set in the same world, and this character might pop up in that one, and things connect in little ways, but it's not telling one overall narrative. So I'm trying to do more of that, but also still at the same time there is a story. We'll see Kane again from the
Mm-hmm.
first arc, and there's more to his story. And I mean, of course, with this, we all, everything is very much building towards the flood, right? Like the rains have started to fall, and we know where that leads. So we will see that story too, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Let me see. Germán and Play also ask, what happened to the Scalped TV series?
It didn't happen. The shot a pilot. It was set up at WGN. So there was a pilot shot. There was a really amazing cast. Gil Birmingham played Red Crow. So the cast was really impressive. But the pilot was cool. But I think pretty much even as they were shooting it, WGN was kind of getting out of the original programming business, so it didn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody will ever get to see that pilot or not. I mean, something could always happen again, but as far as I know right now, there's nothing going on.
Okay. Comic Crack says, morning, everybody. Hello. Any Marvel character you want to work with after Avengers, or maybe a DC one? Like he's going to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't have a long list of characters like I'm walking around itching to get to. Um, I mean, if I was going to DC, I've always said I really like Hawkman. Um, I think Hawkman's like this cool space cop with wings, and he carries a huge mace. Um, uh, Again, I don't know why it's Hawkman speaks to me. It feels like just feels like something to be cool to do. I don't have a long list of like favorite Hawkman stories. I mean, I've read the character here and there over the years, but just feels like a character I could do some cool stuff with. But I mean, I love Batman. I love Superman. There's a part of me I think that feels like you're not a real comic book writer until you've written Superman, um, or not a real superhero writer at least. So
Well, but that makes sense, right? Because he's the original. So in
right.
a way, it feels like to be a proper superhero writer, you have to write the original in some way.
And I wrote Batman for one panel in the Penguin one shot I did, which is
Mhm.
that's the only DCU thing I've ever done. But I've never written Superman.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, and certainly there, I mean, I feel like most all the major Marvel characters I've written in some form or another. Um, there there's certainly ones I'd like to do more
Mhm.
with, but we'll see.
Okay. For you, Hawkman is more the warrior or the scientist?
Well, both. I think he's kind of all that stuff wrapped up. I mean, that's one of the reasons I like characters like Wolverine and Thor, and so that they can function in different kinds of
Mhm.
stories and go to different places. There's not like a typical setting for their stories. I think Hawkman works the same. Like
Yeah.
you could do stories just set on Earth with Hawkman. You could do stories just set in space.
Yeah.
I mean, I would want to do kind of all of the above, but yeah, those are the characters I think I'm always attracted to.
Mutenroy09 says, look, talking about Batman, I'd really love to see you writing a Black Label Batman book. Do you have any ideas for the character?
Maybe. I think I do have a Batman idea written down. I was going to say no. I don't have a long list of ideas written down for characters, but I think I do have one for Batman. I
Hmm.
think I wrote it down. I don't know, within the last couple of years.
Hmm.
So yeah, I guess.
Okay. Pedro Mercader, hello everyone. Hello, Pedro. Francisco Sanchez, did you plan, since more or less the beginning of Scalp, when would it end, and the extension of the whole series? How did they get? How did you get to work with Guéra on that one?
What was the first part of the question?
Did you guys have planned more or less since you started the book, Scalped? When would it end, and how long the series would be?
Well, I knew what the ending would be. Like I pretty quickly figured out, like story wise, how it would end. But in terms of issues, no, not really. And again, when the book's starting out, there was no guarantee we'd get 6 issues, let alone 60. Um, so I remember reading an interview with Brian Azzarello at one point where he was talking about pitching 100 Bullets, and he said Karen Berger asked him, like, if you need to wrap this up in 12 issues, can you do it? And he lied and said yes. So I always wrote like that. I always wrote like, I'm just going to assume we're going to get however many issues we need to until I get a phone call otherwise. And if I get that phone call, that sucks, and I'll have to figure out, okay, how do I tie this up in 6 more issues or whatever, and that'll be difficult. But I never felt like I could write out of fear, right? Thinking like, oh, it's probably going to happen this arc. Like, no, I just felt like I needed to just write like I'm going to be able to write for 200 issues if that's what I need. Um, and so, I think with creator-owned stories, you can kind of feel it as you go. Like again, you've got sort of a general roadmap. I know I'm headed here. You can feel kind of when you get to about the midpoint, and kind of when you're ramping it up to heading towards the finale. I would never have known oh, it's going to be exactly this many issues. And I always tried to avoid saying that because also I don't want to be locked into that. I don't want to like, well, you said it was going to be 75, and now it's only 68. Like, things change as you go, and you might need more, you might need less. And
Hmm.
I think it's always a good thing if you have like, well, I kind of wanted to do this issue or this story and we didn't get to it. I think it's okay to leave with a few bullets still in the chamber as opposed to the other way around where you exhaust every possibility. And
Hmm.
because that means maybe you overstayed your welcome a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you just feel it as you go.
Hmm. And his second question was, how did you get Guéra to work on that book?
Well, that was through our editor, Will Dennis. Will found Guéra. I think Guéra maybe sent him some sample pages just to say, I think just as sort of like me sending stuff to Will. Will was just an editor I knew because he edited a bunch of books that I liked. Um, so I thought, like, well, like my sensibilities are probably close to this guy, and I initially sent him The Other Side, which was a war book, and Will was one of the few editors who edited war books. He was doing Garth Ennis's war stories. Um, so I think Guéra just reached out to Will like, "Hey, here's my stuff." So he kind of just fell into Will's lap, right at the moment we were trying to find somebody to draw Scalped.
Hmm.
And then Guéra drew, I think, just one kind of tryout page for Scalped, just sort of, a page we didn't use. It was like a kind of an imagined scene. Um, and he had drawn some westerns before. I remember seeing those pages.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just sort of like an opportune, happy accident.
Hmm. Robotman asks, hello, Mr. Aaron. Love your work with the three Thors and Gore. How did you come up with the idea of a God Butcher?
I like the idea of doing what was kind of like a horror story with Thor, and I don't know, again, like kind of very much leaning into the idea of Thor as a god. The book was called Thor, God of Thunder. Um, so all that put together kind of led to the idea of this serial killer of gods,
Hmm.
and that all very much tied in. Gore's origin tied in with this idea of worthiness and what does it mean to be a worthy God, and are most gods worthy, and um, yeah. So I think it's kind of all of that.
Okay. Also, how was it working with Esad Ribic? Was he the first pick for you to be the artist for that story?
Yeah. Esad was kind of on board to draw the book before I even had a story.
Hmm.
I had worked with Esad on I think just once before that on this Wolverine one shot. I forgot what it's called, Dark Reign, maybe. It was Wolverine and Phantom X and Marvel Boy all teaming up. Um, and Esad was kind of just starting to get back to penciling. He'd been doing a lot of his painted books, so he wanted to do more penciling. So again, it was just sort of everything was kind of the right time. Felt like the right time for me to do Thor. Hey, Esad wants to do an ongoing book. I was super excited about that, and I think knowing Esad was going to draw it influenced what the story was that I
Hmm.
came up with, and I wanted something big and grand and epic and cosmic and scary because I knew Esad would kill it on all of those things.
Hmm. Francisco Sanchez, are you going to use the prehistoric Avengers again, or did they not succeed as expected?
No, I mean we've continued to see the prehistoric Avengers in the pages of Avengers. We kind of cut between arcs to do origin stories for those different characters.
Hmm.
So actually, the next issue of Avengers that comes out, I think it's 39,
Hmm.
is another one of those. It's the origin of the prehistoric Phoenix, drawn by the great Dale Keown. He he did the previous one of these we did, the Star Brand issue. So he's back doing another one of those. So yeah, those characters continue to be a part of the kind of big overall story I'm telling in Avengers, and they, if anything, their part will only get bigger next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Love from Howard, did the event original Sin story influence or help you to do Thor, not being worthy, or was it your idea? Was it related at all, or the idea that was before that?
Well, the original Sin was just it was in the midst of that event that Thor dropped his hammer. I mean, again, it's just things sort of line up. Like I knew in Thor, I was building towards doing this story where you couldn't pick up the hammer anymore. I was also doing this original Sin story. At some point, it just became this is a good point for that to happen. And I liked that idea of, Nick Fury when he gets powered up with this eye of the Watcher and he sort of sees all and knows all. And I liked that he would bring Thor down with just a whisper, that all he does is whisper something in his ear and Thor's devastated. Like I liked that power. That to me is really creepy, and then of course the question, well, what the hell what did he say to him? What did he whisper? And again, that same notebook, this notebook, there's like a whole page or two in there where I wrote, but it was a long explanation of what he said, like a long speech. And then kind of boiled it down, to one line. So that was always there. I always had that. I kind of, kept it close to my vest for a long time.
Reebok says the work that you and Mike Del Mundo did in Savage Tales was a thing of beauty.
And I mean, Weird Worlds.
Yes,
I assume. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I just translated because it's in Spanish. It's Savage Tales. That probably is the title they gave it here.
Sure.
Let me see. Captain Fantastic Arade says, "Congrats, Jason and David Macho. What a fantastic and how brave did you were creating that Goddess of Thunder. That's one of the best books that Marvel has created in the 20th century."
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Says Love from Howard says, your adventure with Wolverine in Hell was really curious. Are you happy with that story?
Yeah. I mean, I remember being happy with it. I haven't gone back and read it in a long time, but I, don't really go back and read my old stuff too much.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy with. I wrote Wolverine for like 6 years. That was kind of my first, even though it's crossed multiple different books, kind of my first time writing one character for a long time. So yeah, I have a very fond spot in my heart for all those Wolverine stories.
Okay. Noah Van Skyver says, "Hey Jason, can't wait for your Stargill Simpson book."
The Sturgill Simpson. Oh,
Sorry.
cool. Yeah. I'm not sure when that's coming out now, but it's it's been moving along. It's pretty wild and crazy. It's one of the weirdest, craziest things ever written. So can't wait to see what people think of it. And it looks gorgeous. It's got a lot of different really cool artists working on it.
Hello, people. Well, will the idea of the nationalistic war of hero teams continue on your Avengers?
In short, yes, it will.
Okay.
We've seen the globe is full of a lot of hot spots in the Marvel universe right now, and the Avengers are not very popular here in the United States since they're being led by the Black Panther.
Choose MR. Jason, I love your work. When you write a script, do you already have an artist in mind to draw it? Second question. Well, please answer this one, and then I'll go with the second question.
No, I mean not usually. Sometimes, again with Marvel, I may not have any idea who's going to draw the book when I write the script. With creator-owned stuff, yeah, I pretty much always do because it's very much about that it
Yeah.
starts with that relationship, more than it does an idea.
Mhm. And the other question was, what has been the most difficult script for you to write, and how did you get to finish it?
That's a good question. Um, I don't know if I can think of just one that was more difficult. Um, I mean, they're challenging in different ways. Um, I mean, I think that like Conan #1 that I wrote, it was it was difficult, but also not. I mean, I think it's sort of like the thing where you're talking about with the plumber, like
Mhm.
with writing Conan, I'd been training for that job for 30 something years with all the Conan stuff that I'd read and how much I love that character. Um, so I kind of had all that coming into it, but also the flip side of that is that this is a character you've been kind of waiting to do for a long, long time. So you also feel the pressure of like, well, I don't want to screw it up,
Mhm.
like I know I come in with 30 years worth of investment in this character, but I need to put all this into the script so that someone who has 0 years of investment can pick this up and feel the same excitement and investment that I do.
Mhm. Giuseppe, hello. I wanted to ask Jason what comics he's reading for his own pleasure, and if he has ever read Italian comics.
Um, I don't think I've read too many Italian comics. No. Um, so I'm open to recommendations, but I always have a big healthy stack of comics I buy at the comic shop. I think this year my reading has slowed a bit. Um, but I always have specific creators I follow. So I think right now I love Tom King's and Mitch Gerard's Strange Adventures,
Mhm.
and Doc Shaner. Like the three of them are a really perfect team, and I've been that's probably my favorite book I'm reading right now. I love the writer Mark Russell. Pretty much anything he does, and he's still been doing Red Sonja, which has been going on for a couple of years now. I think
Mhm.
that book is super good. Everything that guy does is great. He did the Flintstones a few years ago, which was I never expected a Flintstones comic would be my
Yeah,
favorite comic, but it was.
that's an incredible book. Yes.
Yeah, so I love everything he does.
Mhm. Chusemar says, as a curiosity, if you had to pick Batman or Superman.
If I just had to pick one or the other,
Mhm.
I mean, if you're asking me today, I'd probably pick Superman. If you ask me tomorrow, maybe I'll pick Batman.
Yes, that's why I always answer to these questions. That depends on the day.
Right.
Peter del Mercader, you loved your Wolverine and the X-Men. Is there any chance to see a book with that tone of crazy, bizarre fun from you again?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know exactly what that book will be, but yes, I would love to do another book with that kind of tone.
Mhm. Ramsey Hassan, Mr. Aaron, you're a genius. Scalp is my favorite comic book ever. Was it hard adjusting your drama comics to writing superhero comics, where the page real estate is less in terms of you having to put more splash pages and spreads?
No, I mean, it was hard a few years back when, the comics changed from 22 pages to 20 pages. I mean, that it hurt losing 2 pages. Um, I mean, it wasn't a big transition for me to start writing superhero comics because, again, I've kind of always been reading superhero comics my whole life. And I broke in, with that Wolverine story. But yeah, just in terms of real estate, I mean, it is nice when you're doing a creator-owned book where if it's this needs to be 23 pages, then it's 23 pages. It's like whatever, however long you want to make it. So I do appreciate that luxury.
Mhm. Antonio Hernandez, how was it working with Mike Del Mundo? He's one of my favorite parts of your Thor run.
Yeah, Mike is incredible. I loved the Weird World book that he and I did together. He was kind of the first choice for Thor when we started that volume. And Mike's another one of those guys who's so creative, so imaginative. I know I just need to give him a little bit, and he will go wild with it and draw stuff that
Mhm.
that I could never have dreamed up, um, and could just draw anything. I love his covers in particular. I think he's one of, if not the best cover artist working today.
Hmm.
So yeah, he's an all around incredible artist and a super nice guy too.
Gorbidal says Mr. Aaron reading Blood Meridian like Mario Vargas Llosa's War of the End of the World and Melville's Moby Dick is a unique literary experience, as was reading your great work. Scalp is brilliant.
Well, cheers. Thank you.
Carlina Bensler, amazing Spanish illustrator, says, I must say that Doctor Strange was what brought me back into comics as a reader. So thank you very much, she puts in big letters.
Cool. Well, that's awesome to hear. Thank you.
Blake Royval, how do you normally find artists and what was it like working with John Paul Leon?
I don't believe I have worked with John Paul Leon.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
I would love to. I would love to.
Everybody would love to work with John Paul Leon because
Right.
he's genius. But I honestly, Blake, I think you're confused.
Unless I'm free. I mean, there are times I look back at books and be like, oh, oh shit, I forgot I did that. But I don't. I don't think I'm forget. I think
Yeah.
I'd remember.
I think you could remember working with John.
Right.
I think so. Anyway, Blake, please tell us what book you mean because maybe you're confusing it with somebody else. Ignacio Bernier Perez. Hello, Jason. I'm a huge fan of all your work. How did you change your mind to work on a bleak goddamn story and then go into a light adventure as Sea of Stars or Scalp or Bean or as with another example? Or what when you were doing a Scalp at the same time you were doing Wolverine and the X-Men?
What I mean, I think that's what my mind's always like. I think there's always the bleak and the the silly and imaginative and fun all swirling around at the same time. I mean, I I think I always look like I want to kill somebody or I look like I'm angry, but generally I'm not. Generally, it's all happy stuff. It's all Disney shirts and
Yeah.
tiki drinks and the wrestling and Godzilla movies. Like that's what the inside of my head looks like at all times.
But it also,
Yeah,
you just said
there's also
before,
bleak stuff.
yeah, but as you just said before, it's gotta be a lot more fun, as a writer to change from the Gum Down with Guéra 1 week and then the next week you go to a fun book. You just change the tone. It's first it's
Sure.
healthy, I think, and second it's gotta be for you. Oh, changing muscles, so it's gotta be more investing, right, for you as a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Maybe it would not be as fun to just do the goddamn every week, week
Yeah.
after week, like that. I might write myself into the mental hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's as a consumer of entertainment, that's what I'm like. I don't want to just watch the same sort of thing over, and I like a little bit of everything. And absolutely, I think that's what I'm like as a writer, and certainly does help you flex those different muscles. And it never feels like you're working a job where you're stamping license plates over and over again, right? Like every week is a different challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's not like you want to watch an epic, bombastic superhero movie every week.
Right.
And you also change. I need more intimate now. I need more bombastic. As an artist, it's the same thing, right? You just like to change to keep your mind healthy and looking for more challenges.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so let me see. Francisco Sanchez, he was really curious to see Wolverine as a teacher in the X Mansion. Do you think that clashes with any of the former versions of the characters, or you saw that as making him mature as a character?
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess making him mature is about telling a very specific story, which I think part of it came from, I broke into comics with Wolverine. The first several Marvel, excuse me, stories I was doing were Wolverine. At the same time, my son was born, so I was a new dad. So I think at some point I liked the idea of Wolverine stepping into that same sort of role. That maybe it's like every parent. I think you get to the point where no matter how cool you think you are, when I'm cool, like I write comic books for a living. That's cool in terms of dads, but you're still the one. You're still the dad. You're still the one who tells the kid like, "Hey, would you brush your teeth? Would you maybe pick up all this shit in the floor? Would you do your homework?" So at some point, you're not cool in the eyes of your own children. Your friends are still cool, but you're not cool because you're their dad. So I think I just wanted Wolverine to have to feel that pain the same way that I was. Like for Wolverine to feel like I'm Wolverine, I'm cool, I'm the popping the claws and the snicked and the stabbing ninjas guys. But then you're the principal at a high school and where you're not cool
Yeah,
anymore. You're
you
not
suddenly
cool to
become
these
the bad
kids,
guy.
right?
Gore Vidal says as recommendations, she says Guido Crepac's Valentina books, which has been published by Fantagraphics, are my Italian recommendations, Mr. Aaron.
Cool, thank you.
But you've read Corto Maltese, right?
I have not. No, I have
Oh,
not.
oh, 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 oh.
I
Okay,
know.
that you must do. Okay, and that's the epitome of Italian comics. They're so this, but that's what you think about. Let me see. Kale Robinson. Hey Jason, are there any habits in writing you've picked or dropped after which everything changed for you? If, for example, give every character something to want, never start a story with such and such, etc. Thanks.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think I've got a list of rules or habits quite like that. Um, I mean, certainly, giving every character something they want. I mean, I think that's sort of part of figuring out who that character is.
Hmm.
Even if those are things that don't seem to actually make it into the story, like they're there whether you see them or not. Um, so yeah, I think the more you can figure out about who this character is, what they like or don't like, where they came from, where they want to go, it all just helps you tell their story.
Yeah, I think it's part of the preparation for you as a writer, right? Every time you are going to start writing a character, before that, be it your own character or company owned Marvel,
Right.
you gotta understand and know that character from from the moment he wakes up in the morning from when to gets to bed, what he needs, what he wants, what he hates, what are his quirks or her quirks, right?
Sure. Sure. And that that's I guess easier when you're writing a creator-owned book. Easier and harder also in that you got to figure all that shit out for yourself. Like you can't rely on any writers from the past. It's all what you make up.
Yeah.
When you're writing Avengers, you got to figure that out for a whole team of characters who have been around for a long time and are also appearing in other books in their own books. So that's a lot to try to balance or figure it out. Team books are hard. That's
Yeah,
what that's one of the reasons why.
I can imagine. Francisco Sanchez says Doctor Strange with an axe. It was so bizarre that I had to buy that book. How did you get that idea?
For which book?
Doctor
Doctor
Strange.
Strange. Magic is one of those things we would talk about in Marvel retreats every time and try to figure out the rules of magic and how does magic work. And I just wanted to do a Doctor Strange story that was showing that there was only one rule of magic that I cared about. I think you give too many rules, it doesn't seem magic anymore.
Yeah.
But to me, it just everything needed to have a price. I think for too long we'd been using Doctor Strange as a Deus Ex Machina where he could show up and he could just wave his hands and
Boom.
do whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but it should suck to be this guy, right? Like the just like with Thor, Doctor Strange walks a very different beat. And it's a beat that's gonna either kill you or rot your soul or drive you mad. There's no happy retirement home for former Sorcerer Supreme, right? Like these things end badly for these guys because they're dealing with things that they shouldn't have to deal with. So for every time he shows up and waves his fingers, there's a price to be paid, whether he's paying it himself physically or spiritually, or it's being paid by the world at large. Either way, he has to be aware of what that price is. And if
Hmm.
he goes too long without paying it, eventually the bill comes due.
Hmm. And but he was also asking, how do you have the idea of having his use an axe?
Oh, an axe. I think just I wanted him to be more physical, not just to stand around and and make his finger signs, but to like get in and mix it up. So I don't remember if maybe it was Chris who came up with giving him an axe, but we
Hmm.
just I think I just talked about him pulling different weapons, different things out of his cloak,
Mhm.
just so we could see him mix it up, use his fists a little more.
Okay. So, just so you know, we've just crossed the 2 hour mark, and I believe that you need to go to lunch back to your life because it's 1 p.m. right there, right? So, probably your stomach is like, roar, 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 already.
A little bit, a little
Yeah.
bit.
So, let's leave it here. If Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here, Jason.
No problem. Thank you,
Please
David.
don't cut because I want to say proper thank you to you after we're off, the live feed. And to all of you, thank you for being here. Thank you for all your amazing questions. Again, don't be assholes. Wear your mask. And see you all tomorrow with Mr. JM De Mateis. Again, thank you so much, Jason.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, we're off. See you tomorrow.